Good evening, everybody. Welcome back to PSGL. George Morgan here, your commentator, alongside me, TK, who is going to be rounding off the season with me. Down the inside, absolutely impossible season.
This is for the win between these two.
I'm on the edge of my seat.
He needs to get it done now.
Blakely will dive to the inside.
We're robust. We've got our elbows out.
Ronard takes the lead.
Because here comes Alfie Butcher.
Can't really complain with that one.
It's not going to be easy. The pressure is on, of course.
Yarda Watmere is your champion.
Well, good evening, everybody, and welcome back to PSGL. This is, of course, on a Monday night. It is the PlayStation tier. It is PSF1 for round number 11 of Season 40, and it is with the cancellation of the Mexico Grand Prix, the last race of the season. And thankfully, we will be seeing the last race of the season because the attendance once again is shambolic. We'll come on to that in a few moments' time. But at least we can round out this season on what is, in my opinion, the best circuit on the F1 calendar and potentially the best racing circuit of all time. It is the Brazilian Grand Prix at Interlagos. I've got a picture of it behind me there over my left-hand shoulder. An absolute masterpiece. And speaking of masterpieces, look who we've got in the commentary box. Myself, Tom, and alongside me, I'm delighted to say once again, it is Dan or Daka. How are you doing, my friend?
I'm doing it very well, and thanks for the compliment. And yes, very much looking forward to seeing what's left of PSF1 go at it one final time in this season. I'm with you on Interlagos. It is just a spectacular track in every sense of the word, yes, and has produced some absolutely stunning races over the years, both in real life and in league racing. Hopefully by some miracle that is going to be the case once again tonight, but we shall remain to see. Just a few minutes out from this session getting underway with one round knocked off the end of the season, so we will be bringing the curtain down on PSF1 tonight.
We will be bringing the curtain down, but the championships were both decided last week. One we knew about, one we didn't know about at the time, but has been confirmed in the last 7 days with the cancellation of the final round. McLaren picked up the constructors commandingly, considering their performances over the last few weeks. And if we head over to have a look at the drivers' standings, we have our new champion. It is Oscar driving for McLaren. 99 points, just needs one more to bring up his century. And I'm fairly certain with the numbers that we have got this evening, he should be getting to the three-figure mark. Volokonga not quite going to get there unless he maximises it with pole position and the full 16 points in the race, but that will only take him to 90, so my maths is clearly not on point there. We haven't seen Alex Lofer or Owen for the last 4 weeks make that 5 because once again they are not taking place. Lifebad as well, pick up a ban after some questionable driving last week, it is fair to say. Still a battle to try and get inside the top 5 as well. Asm currently holding that on 40 points. Then you go down to Marius Formula on 33 and Silo, who picked up a brilliant victory at Las Vegas last week. Very much hit the jackpot, held off the two charging papaya boys of Oscar and Volokongan to pick up that very impressive victory, jumping up from comfortably outside the top 10 ahead of the likes of Tony Richet. Evan Nye as well, only finished 10th last week, but has been very, very impressive in his 4 appearances since graduating from F2.
Yes, and indeed, and it does show Silo only with 3 points finishes this season. Evan Nye with just the 4, managing to catapult themselves into the top 10 in the standings. We are actually getting more and more drivers flooding into the lobby, by the way, so we may actually get a slightly more impressive looking grid than we were anticipating. We shall see just a few minutes out from the start of the race. Yes, that is the championships wrapped up, and it is also worth noting that because of the absence of Alex Lofer and Owen tonight, it wouldn't have mattered whether or not we were running that final race at Mexico City. If they're not here tonight, they can't close the gap, and Oscar would have been the champion anyway. So this does serve as something of a victory lap for the Norwegian driver, and while the circumstances of his championship win are, I think, less than desirable, it's hard to deny that he is a deserving champion for the simple reason that the drivers who could have gotten the best of him just haven't turned up. So he's done the job, done what he needed to do. He's attended every single race this season, and I think he's rewarded with a crown that he richly deserves.
100%, definitely the deserving champion. And ever since Alex Lofer and Owen have decided that they aren't going to be attending, he's been almost bulletproof. Didn't quite win last week in Las Vegas, came through in second place. So looking to make it 4 wins out of the last 5 races, I think, for Oscar, which would be a tremendous way to end the season. And yeah, you could say there's a bit of an asterisk over it with the number of people dropping out. For me, I think that is a bit of a skill issue, it has to be said, with the number of people that have decided to sack it off halfway through the season. If only they had some proper setups, which you can get your hands on. If only they knew about sim racing setups, the best in the business, developed by the very drivers here in PSGL, not the ones that you would normally see in this tier, because half the time they don't turn up. But you can unlock those extra tenths per second with the Pro F125 car setups, esports and stable setups available for every single circuit on this game, qualifying and race setups, dry or wet weather. They've got you absolutely covered. Optimal race strategies and free meta setup updates as well, compatible with all platforms as you would expect, and all of them available for just the low price of £49.99. I can't remember how many tracks it is. I think it's 24 tracks. So if you divide £49.99 by 24, you're looking at quite the good deal there. Head over to simracingsetup.com to get your hands on them, and you can use the code PSGL at checkout to get yourself a 5% discount, something that a lot of the drivers that we've been seeing drop out this season should have been doing.
Yes, and if you do decide to use setups from Sim Racing Setups, maybe one day you will too be on the PSF1 grid, and maybe you can see the season all the way out. So make sure to check them out. We are finally, though, looking to get the action underway. We've actually ended up with a more decent grid than we expected. 12 drivers, absolutely stunning stuff from this PSF1 grid, and they're going to take this on. And at the very least, we are going to get treated to, as both Tom and I have been saying over and over, this absolutely gorgeous racetrack that we're going to see, and of course over one lap also a spectacle to behold. Much to do in the race as well. We'll talk about that later on, but first off we're going to see how these guys take it on, and with a short lap, a very intense lap as well. We should be seeing, despite there only being 12 cars out on track, a very action-packed qualifying session, but we're going to get this underway. And this is track. I mean, look at all these elevation changes, look at all that scenery. It's a gorgeous track, and we're going to see the drivers that take this on. 18 minutes of in theory, some of the best drivers on the PlayStation platform going at it. Let's see who's going to come out on top.
100%. Because it's such a short track, fast track as well, the times should be fairly close together, but like we've alluded to, just 12. We thought it was only going to be 10, so it's actually a couple better than we thought, but shameful, I think, is the best way to describe it, the attendance that we've seen, especially in the second half of the season. If you think about the work that goes on behind the scenes, not just to work out PSGL, PSF1, but all the people in the higher-ups working on the PC side as well, for the top division on the PlayStation side to have attendance that is so poor week in, week out, I think is very, very disgraceful. And I think some of the drivers that have been deciding to sack off the second half of the season, hopefully they'll be expecting not to be invited back ever again. And the drivers that do go week in, week out, whether it is the drivers that have been putting in the hard yards in PSGL, PSF1, or indeed the two tiers below in particular, will be rewarded with their commitment. But that's the rant over. We're going to get on to what we want to see, and that is racing. And it is Lawrence who has thankfully changed his name back to what it should be. And it's a fairly decent first sector, 17 flat. Should be seeing drivers dipping their toes into the 16s through that really intense first sector. It feels really simple, only 3 corners, but the center S's, if you just get it ever so slightly wrong, you can just be a bit lazy over those curves and throw your lap time away before it has even started in the curve of the soul, especially in the wet, which we could be seeing considering it is Brazil. Very difficult to actually take that corner flat. You've got to be very, very precise with it through this brilliant middle sector as well. Twisting, turning, digging the front end of the car into Bico de Pato, now powering down the hill of turn 11 through Magulio and up into Jungshao, final braking zone of the circuit. Very difficult to get the power down, very difficult to be precise on your turning point as well, because you can leak all of the time if you get the turning point wrong, all the way down to turn 1 on the center S's.
Heading up towards the line now, up to the line. Lawrence, where's it going to be? It's going to be just dipping into the 106s just about. We'll see how that's going to be followed further back on the track. I believe Armateo is the next driver along, and Lawrence went out significantly earlier than anyone else. So we're watching Mateo, the champion, the outgoing champion from last season, navigating that middle sector, heading through Pinarino. You're exercising a lot of caution and precision and patience on that throttle pedal all the way throughout these traction zones. He manages to keep it relatively clean, being just a little bit offline, heading through the first 2 sectors in 51.27 seconds. 4th gear out of Jungshao for better traction, and he keeps it nice and clean on the exit. Again, expect times to be relatively close around this circuit. It's a track that takes a little bit of dialing in, but once you are going to be on it, as Volakongan is elected to bring his session to a close in the pit lane, as Evan Nye goes to the top of the timesheets on a 106.9. 6.7, so really strong lap from the Mercedes driver. One of the most impressive stories, I think, from the first half of this season is Finlay has gone off. Looks to be Ferradura, so that's another driver bringing his session to a close.
Well, what actually I think is happening is the lobby hasn't been set up brilliantly, so we don't get the drivers jumping in, and when people do try to set the lobby up, they do it incorrectly because corner cutting has been left on regular, which is not ideal.
Goodness.
Means that they can absolutely abuse the track limits and get absolutely no punishment for it. That is why Volokongan retired. That is why Finlay binned as well through Ferradura. So I believe we'll be restarting this qualifying session. The champion, Oscar, is going to cut the beam. We'll see what his pace is like. 106.6. I mean, it doesn't matter, but it is a benchmark thrown down. The gauntlet been thrown down, and we are going to have to do a restart, which is absolutely wonderful, I have to say.
Not just the qualifying on the track limits. We've also got Parc Ferme being on the wrong setting as well. So it's absolutely magnificent work, and it just shows the level of commitment that some of these drivers have. So yeah, we are going to get this session restarted, and it means that we have to wait a good deal longer before going home. So that's massively irritating. So we'll try and get this sorted nice and quickly and get things back underway. So a little bit of a false start in this session, and hopefully we can get that action back on track soon.
Fingers crossed we can get going fairly shortly. Obviously, they're going to have to retire through the race as well. So what I have seen on this game sometimes is when you do try and do a restart, you've got to be careful because even if red flags are off, I believe the game can still throw a red flag if people just absolutely bin it into the wall off the starting block. So just need to be careful of that one. Oscar taking pole though. No, he's not, because we're going to go for the 18 minutes all over again, which means we can have another bit of a discussion and a chinwag about the goings on so far this season. Should we head over to the calendar? It's not going to be the most up to date though, because two races didn't actually happen this season. If you can remember all the way back to the beginning of July, feels like a while ago, was nearly 3 months ago. We kicked things off in Austria, then we went through to Jeddah and Spa before the first of our 2 break weeks, although one of them was slightly extended, it has to be said. Imola, when we came back, that was an absolute banger of a race. If you can remember back to the beginning of August, that was a brilliant one. Potentially race of the season, although there are a couple of other candidates. Silverstone and Hungary, both equally exciting as well. It says Bahrain there, but it was eventually Qatar due to the interesting curb usage, let's say, that can be taken. And the, I can't remember what the right phrase was, the bunny hop. I think that's what it used to be about 10 years ago, but it was sort of suck you into the ground and then spit you into the stratosphere.
It would stop the car dead, essentially, when you hit it. So the nose of the car would dig into the ground and the rear of the car would go flying up. It was absolutely glorious and, yeah, ultimately not suitable for league racing. So we shifted that out to Qatar, and another race that wasn't that in the end didn't really happen due to server issues with EA. So that was another one stripped off, and then we headed, I believe, to Kota for this enthralling, it must be said, end to the season.
100%, yeah. Kota was, even though it was in the back half of the season, the attendances has started to drop. That was still a very exciting race, I think it's fair to say. Some really good action. A strategy race as well, early safety car. Balance between 1 stop or 2 stop. Some drivers going for one, other drivers going for the other. And in the end, it was Oscar who looked after his tyres better than everybody else, who in the last 3 or 4 laps was able to scamper off into the distance and pick up one of many victories he has taken in the back half of this season. Japan wasn't the most exciting, it has to be said. Vegas was a cool one, though. We got some good battles out there. We had some less good battles, but the less we speak about that, the better. Strategy again came into play. We had drivers going for the overcut, going for the longer tyre off, trying to get the bigger tyre offset, I should say, to come charging back at the leaders come the end of the race. It wasn't McLaren on top, as it had been for probably 50% of the races this season. It was Silo picking up that first victory. And now we arrive in Brazil for the finale. Yes, it says round 12 Mexico. That is not being taken. We're not heading to North America for reasons that you can probably understand with what we have said so far. But hopefully Brazil, even though second time lucky, we're going to try and get the settings right, will be an exciting one to round off the campaign.
Typically is around this track, and well, I have seen some brilliant league races in the past with small grids, so hopefully the expectations can still be high. Just of course reflecting on the season, I would say my 3 favourite races of this season happened in back-to-back weeks, or we may have had a break week in the middle, but it's rounds 3, 4 and 5. Belgium, Imola and Silverstone were all absolutely tremendous excitement going on out on the track. Of course, remember back to Mexico, or to Mexico, my goodness. I'm all over the place tonight as well. But back to the race at Spa in Belgium. We had an awesome end to the race with Reiderdal making a huge bed on slicks at the end. Didn't pay off in the end, but it gave us some good drama. And then, of course, Owen making that overtake for the win. Imola, another great race with Oscar pulling off that wonderful move at Tamburello for the win. And then it's Silverstone with strategies galore, different groups all coming together. That heartbreak on the final lap for Fraser in the end, and that win for Volakongen breaking the drought. That was, for me, an incredible stretch of races early on in the season. It also set up what probably should have been a magnificent title fight, which is sadly petered out in the end. But there's certainly still some good memories to look back on, I'd say, especially in those 3 rounds.
I think you can add Hungary to the list as well, to be fair, because we thought that was going to be a bit of a snooze fest. It turned out it was a strategy masterclass, and a really interesting one. We had that group of 6 at the end. 2 of them broke free. Those 2 drivers decided that would be their last race of the season, unfortunately. But yeah, Hungary definitely one that we should be putting right up there. Some of the best action we saw this season. I believe we are loading in, which is absolutely excellent news. This will be a brilliant time for the servers to decide now is the time to break. But thankfully they have not, and we are arriving in Brazil for the second time this evening. 18 minutes on the clock. Fingers crossed we have the settings in correctly. We can try again to get this qualifying session on the road.
Yes, indeed. So, yeah, we will keep a close eye on some of the drivers out on track and whether they're actually being punished for any off-track infringements, and track limits infringements, I should say, that they're going to be picking up as we get this underway. So 18 minutes of the best drivers on the PlayStation platform going at it. So, actually, I may just have a quick look over the settings myself to make sure that we're all good to go. You can never be too careful these days, I suppose, but I think we should be just about okay, hopefully. So yeah, these drivers should be punished now for running off of the racing circuit, and they should be, well, tested to the max to put in the fastest time possible. And I imagine some of these drivers out there are still going to be motivated. There are some drivers, say the Haas boys, for example, who have struggled for points throughout the season. To their credit, they've still attended fairly well, and with just a grid of 12, they may have their own chances of picking up some solid points tonight. That is one of the positives that some drivers can take out of a round like this. There are points on offer here. We thought there were going to be points on offer for absolutely everyone, as we were expecting a grid of 10. With a grid of 12, still good opportunities for everyone. Just taking the checkered flag may be good enough to get more points on the board tonight.
100%, especially considering usually what happens is we lose one driver at the end of lap 1. So definitely an opportunity for somebody to try and pick up some points, even if they qualify towards the back. And as I accidentally click or push the left trigger of my controller into my calf, unideally, as it changed camera, we can go on board with our Mateo, the reigning champion, the recently deposed champion. Hasn't been around for too much this season, only attended about half of the races, and hasn't quite shown the same turn of speed that he had on F1 24. Decent first sector so far, 17 flat. That's what we saw from Lawrence in the first attempt earlier on, about 10 minutes ago. A little bit wide though, going through Desida de Lago, just pushing him out of kilter ever so slightly and charging up the hill into Ferragira. A total commitment required. Gets a little bit wobbly over the curb, slightly wide through 7, and then breaking down heavy into turn number 8. You could really attack the curb on the inside and then pin it through Pinarino, trying to find the traction as early as you possibly can.
Onto the brakes now, and to the end of the lap at Vico to Pato, then very difficult traction zone, but Matteo managing to get onto the throttle pedal really early then as he heads up towards Junshao, uphill braking zone 50.8. That's more like it to the first 2 sectors. Really clean picking up the throttle too. This is a very strong lap, it seems, from the Aston Martin driver. So let's see where the Italian is able to put himself, and we'll see where the rest of the grid can go in comparison. 106.6, that's right up there with what we saw from Oscar in the first session. So going very well, and 2/10 to the good ahead of Lawrence. Ferrari over the line of Dirk, just getting the lap time started. So it's the Haas next up of Finlay who goes fastest at a 106.6, just pepping Matteo to the post on that one. So really good lap from the British driver. Just further down the road, Mario's formula has invalidated this lap, so it does seem as though we do have proper track limits to catch some of the drivers out. So Finlay typically a quick driver over one lap too, managing to get off to a good start, but Oscar is going very quickly through the first sector. First two sectors, looking to stamp his authority on the field, and does so. 106.5, and the champion of this tier, once again showing that, especially in the absence of a lot of the other top names in this championship, he has risen to the top once again in the early stages, and looks to try and take control of yet another evening of racing.
Already taken this qualifying session by the scruff of the neck. Evan Nye about 3/10 down through the first couple of sectors, ends up just over 3/10 down, nearly 4/10 down, slowest of the 5 lap times we have thus far. Bit of a coming together there between Lawrence and Dirk. Dirk invalidating, yet to get a time on the board. Fraser, Nico Source and Volokongan in the pits. Here is your own decent first sector, 17 flat. That seems to be the magic number for a lot of the drivers, but it's the technical middle sector where we're seeing the time gained or lost. 50.9, a little bit slower than Evan Nye, so your own in the saddle. Better be hoping that they're running some slightly lower wings as Lafferty up into P4, 106.7, nearly 3/10 down on our champion Oscar, keeping it all the way over to the left-hand side, minimising the distance between the run out of Jungshao and the beam, and your own goes 6th fastest, 7 milliseconds faster than Evan Nye. Make that 7th as Marius Formula pops up into position 3.
Yeah, Marius Formula typically quick over one lap, very close at the top as you'd expect around Interlagos, a track that's always produces a lot of excitement in race trim and very competitive qualifying sessions just before that. Dirk is heading through the middle sector now, bit of a tentative run though, heading in towards turn number 8, had to take a couple of stabs at the turn, and heading out of a Pinorimio, nice and early on the throttle. These drivers, if I can say one thing, they are very, very good with that throttle pedal, keeping the tyres just below that rate of spinning them up and keeping it nice and steady. But Dirk not quite finding the speed of a lot of the other drivers in this session, having a massive slide through the middle of Jungshao, which isn't going to do him any favours, and I imagine that's going to be putting him near the tail end of the field. He does have plenty of battery to use, mind you, on the run to the line, so maybe saving a bit more than some others, but he's still well adrift of the rest on a 107.3, so messy lap from the Ferrari. Oscar then very much on top. One of the drivers who hasn't set a time yet is his teammate Volokongan, who of course the two of them wrapped up that constructors title last time out. That was also looking like a superb championship fight between them, Alpine and Red Bull. In the end, it of course hasn't turned out that way. McLaren, by virtue of attendance mainly, have pretty much run away with it, so congrats to those two anyway, and we'll see where Volokongan can end up, because he's on a bit of a roll at the moment. I believe it's 5 podiums in his last 6 appearances.
100%, and considering he didn't pick up a podium for nearly 2 seasons, he's done very, very well to kick off F1 25 very much on the right foot, and even broke a wind drought as well back in, what race was it? I can't actually remember now. It was a little while ago. Silverstone, that's what it was. Yes, we discussed it earlier on, didn't we? Rotating nicely through Bica de Bato, turn 10, and charging down through Magulio. Maybe a little bit of traffic with the Ferrari. Wasn't particularly quick in the first sector. Decent middle sector, though, matching Oscar, although losing that 10th and a half in the first sector. Dirk getting out of the way. No slipstream for Volokongan, and we'll see where the second McLaren can go. Has typically been a couple of tenths slower than Oscar over one lap, but does come back into fray when we get to race pace, and is nearly a quarter of a second down, slotting into position number 5 on a 106.7. Just 2 drivers yet to get a time on the board. One of them, the Williams of Nico Source, currently barrelling through the middle sector. Slightly slowly, though.
Yeah, I wouldn't say barreling, Tom. It seems as though he's backed off of that one. His first sector was reasonably competitive, but yeah, seemingly not quite happy with his efforts so far, so he'll go again later on in the session. One thing I do want to point out as well, some of the drivers who may end up being disappointed with their qualifying efforts, as Lawrence invalidates at the Senna S, very easy to do, mind you, so a lap in the bin for the Mercedes driver. One peculiarity about this track, oh my goodness, I seem to be drawing a bit of a blank out there. Yes, it's with the grid of 12 drivers we have out there. It does potentially open up some openings for potential different strategies. Of course, we've kind of lamented at times throughout this season that some of these drivers haven't gone bold on strategy when they've wanted to, with most of these drivers having very little to lose tonight, and a small grid meaning you're not giving up much track position from a poor qualifying. Maybe you'll see some drivers going for it, trying to mix it up. We may get rain as well in the race, so variables to come later on, but keep an eye on maybe how this smaller grid can potentially give us some more excitement. We shall see as we head into the middle phase of this qualifying session. A number of drivers still heading out there, and still relentless action out there as Finlay's gone out of the session, so hopefully we can get the Haas back in, as he's going quite well in this session at the moment.
Fingers crossed, yeah. Lafferty making a mistake though, was up by a little bit through the first sector. Did manage to get into the 116, just 0.16.9 seconds through the first sector, but a little bit wide going through Descida de Lago means that lap has been put in the bin and will back off and go again. Finlay wasn't an outlap, but having disconnected has returned to the pit lane. Marius Formula currently holding position number 3, just over a 10th down on Oscar, who does have a sizable gap out in front considering how close things normally are. But there's Marius Formula into the 16.9 first sector, up by nearly half a tenth. Hasn't got too much traffic to deal with on this lap. You've got Armateo in the Aston Martin a couple of corners ahead. Taking a lot of curb actually is the Alpine there in Marius Formula through Ferradura, and then running slightly wide through Larandini of turn number 7, but gets it rotated nicely through turn 8 and 9, keeping it tight through Pinarino. We'll see how well he can negotiate. Beaker Pata really aggressive on the steering wheel, trying to crank the lock-in from that front axle. The Aston Martin of Armateo out the way, slightly wide through Maguglia. We'll see, has gained a further 10th, but that is not a particularly good line through Jung Xiao, missing the apex by quite some tune. Was up by a 10th and a half, probably though going to leak a little bit on the run up to the line.
He's running out of battery too. We'll see how much that error has cost him, and that was quite a sizable error at this level. He still manages to go second, but you can see the time lost in about a 10th of a second on what he was on earlier, and that would have been good enough for pole position on a 106.4. So more to come from Marius Formula. You would think very aggressive and really nice through most of that lap, keeping it error free, but just maybe running out of grip for the turn in for the last corner in the end. Just running out of a grip then, and yeah, has to settle for second, but looking very, very good in terms of pace. So maybe Oscar is going to have something at least to think about further down the line. He managed to give some good slipstream to Armateo. He's on a lap as well, but further along is the Kicksauber of Euron, who heads up towards the line and goes up to 5th, a solid lap on a 106.7. He is, though, immediately bested by Evan Nye, of course, one of the big surprise packages of this season. Goes into 3rd place. Lafitte goes up into 6th position in the RB, and he will stay there as a Fraser in the Haas goes some way adrift on a 106.9. So Oscar still on top, surviving a bit of an onslaught then from Marius Formula. The reigning champion is barreling down towards the line as well. Just 700ths up, but that may be good for a solid jump up the grid, and it is. Goes up in a 3rd, and we've got 3 drivers now on a 106.5.
Incredibly close now, isn't it? If you look from first in Oscar in first down to Lawrence in P9, just a quarter of a second. Oscar, I think, has potentially backed off. You can see the ERS light flashing at the back of the McLaren as he comes down through Maguglia. Was up a little bit through the first set, but now 3/10 down and has definitely bailed out of that one, but does still have 600ths of a second in his back pocket. Dirk making a mistake again. I think this is Dirk's 5th attempt in this qualifying session potentially. He's only got 1 lap time on the board, and 107.3 isn't exactly the most competitive run in the world, it has to be said. Interested to know about the progress of Finlay, who was invalidated actually through the centre S's, so we'll jump on board with the second McLaren of Volokongen. Again, not particularly quick through the first sector, only a 17.1, so maybe tells us that Volokongen running slightly higher wings to try and maximise this middle sector and give him some little bit better tyre wear in the race.
Possible, and he does tend to save his tyres quite well in race time. It may also be choosing to save a bit more battery for later on in the lap. We'll see how that fares for him in the 3rd sector especially, but he's heading through now through Beaker to Pato, not quite there on the inside curb, and rotating the car very early for a straighter exit, sacrificing a little bit of apex speed. Now we'll see what the 2nd sector time is. It's just a fraction up, and the rear threatening to step away, heading through Jun Xiao, so maybe not quite getting the grip he wants either. He's only a fraction up, and at the moment, with a lot of drivers congregating on that 106.5, 106.6, Volokongen needs a big end to the lap, but he's running out of battery, and in the end it's just an improvement of 0.09 of a second, not very significant at all. So he's still buried down there in P8. His teammate Oscar not able to quite find more time on that second run, diving to the pit lane in the end. So Volokongen still down there in 8th. Of course, he doesn't have much to lose. He's got 2 drivers that are within 4 points of him in the standings, but in the total absence of those 2 guys, and of course we haven't seen them in months at this point, he is fairly safe, and essentially with the constructors wrapped up as well, like most of the drivers here, he's essentially just racing for pride. The stakes a bit lower for tonight, and maybe some of these drivers can race a bit more freely as a result.
on the beach. Volokongan can't finish any higher or lower than second place. Watch out for Nico Source here. Surprised he didn't find any real improvements in the middle sector. Picked up 0.2 of a second in sector 1. Must have been a bit of a wobbly one on his first attempt, but basically matching his middle set, so unable to extract any more performance from these tyres. We'll see where he jumps up. Currently P11 on a 108.8, 106.8 I should say, now a 6.6 into position number 6, pushing Lafferty, Euron and Volokongan a little bit further down. Dirk has also managed to get a representative time on the board. Yes, it's only 11th place, but he's less than 0.3 down on the provisional poll time. Definitely is in with a shout of picking up a few more places come the end of the session. And Finlay jumps back up into P3, pushes Armateo and Evan Nye down a couple of spots. 106.57 off Oscar, who at the moment has only set one time in this qualifying session, and it has been comfortably good enough for pole.
Yes, indeed, still to the good of 600 of a second. We got a bit of a lull here in the action, it seems, and I imagine a final flurry of times to come in the last minute or two. So we'll hold off for now, and hopefully we get some big action further down the line. Been keeping an eye as well, making sure these guys are still proving that they are PSF1. Have we toppled the PSF2 pole time? Yes, we have, but just barely by 0.06 of a second by Oscar, although there was a lot of 106.6s as well in that session, so these drivers have still got plenty to do in order to restate their dominance over the rest of the PlayStation grid in PSGL. We'll see how that fares later on in the session. I imagine there's still time out there on the track. Oscar, as Tom said, only one lap done in the session. Mario's Formula we saw make that mistake at Junshao. Does seem as though those two have much more to find, and at the moment they do sit 1 and 2 in the session, so pole may come down to those guys, but we shall see. There can always be surprises from elsewhere. Still 11 of the 12 driver grid separated by less than 0.3 of a second, so it's very competitive out there. Marius Formula is going to be the first of the real top contenders, and actually the first of anyone to get a real final run on the board, so we'll see what the Alpine driver can do. The man from Cyprus, that ever clean run to the end of that lap he had, he may have had pole position already, but he's got a chance to make amends. He comes over the line. Let's get the final flurry of this qualifying session kicked off.
Bit of a lock-up on the front left going down into the centre S's, but really pinning the throttle pedal going through the second part and keeping it very, very tight going through Curve and Sol. The McLaren coming out of the pit lane is going to get out of the way, and only one car now between himself and the Aston Martin of Armateo. Flicking it in. Oh, bit of a wobble though as we go through the scene of the Lager. Marisford was up ever so slightly as Lafferty now getting out of the way. Clear run through the middle sector now for the Alpine and Maris Formula. Charging into Ferragiro through Larangina. A little bit of a wobble again. Looks very unstable, the back of that Alpine car. Maybe something not quite properly set up correctly to get some decent rotation there through Pinarino. Now down into Beacon of Pato, trying to get the car rotated. You can see the flick, but as we saw in his second attempt, just ever so slightly wide of the apex. He's got to make sure he gets Jung Shao up, because that is where all the time is lost. Unfortunately, though, he's caught up with Armateo. 12,000 down, again is slightly wide of the apex as he was on run number 2. The Aston Martin's going to get out of the way. Can't go too slowly, Armateo, because that will compromise his lap time. But has Marius Formula found enough time in that final sector to take provisional pole away from Oscar? Wasn't the cleanest run as he cuts the beam. Is it an improvement? It is, but he misses out by 8 milliseconds.
Yeah, just not a clean lap at all from Maris Formula. The pace there, but the execution not. Just a run of little errors all the way throughout that lap, and another one at Junshao, just a little bit wide of the apex, costing him dearly then. Oscar, the door does seem open. He's out there on the track as well. So as the defending champion Armateo, though, and he's found 0.08 of a second in the first sector alone. So the Italian going very nicely then. He did get a bit of a tow from Oscar over the line. Maybe he was banking on that. He uses 6th gear on the entrance to Ferradura. Running out wide, though. The tyres maybe not giving him what he wanted now as he heads into the heart of the middle sector, heading through Pinarino. Difficult traction zone. He's on that throttle pedal early, controls the car nicely with the throttle and the steering, breaking down into Pico de Pato. So difficult to get the car rotated on the brakes and keep it in a straight line. He uses all of the track on the exit. Has that served him well? It has indeed. Armateo, as he's stepping up at the last in this season, it wasn't the cleanest run to the final corner either. He may be getting a little bit of assistance from the Mercedes out in front of him, but he may well be storming back into the fray here in PSF1. Armateo to the line. No, just that run to the line costing him dear. 105.6. It was looking so promising, but in the end not rewarded with the fastest time. It was Laffiti from nowhere goes on to the top of the field, and Volokongan jumps Oscar too. Wow, huge drama here at the end of this session. This is an open session, and Laffiti, just like he did once earlier in the season, catapulting to the front of the grid. Is that going to be good enough?
Well, Oscar's done. Made a mistake in the middle sector. Is out of this qualifying session. Marius Former thought he had booked a ticket to the front row. Armateo thought he was taking pole away from Oscar. Both of them making mistakes on the lap and ending up 4th and 6th respectively. There's still opportunities for them to be pushed down. Here's Nico Source, who was showing some really good flashes of pace, in particular in the first sector. Can he try and extract the performance from the Williams in the middle sector? No, he's down by 300s. Needs a good run through Jung Shao. Seems like a very tricky corner, especially for the drivers that are going for the flicking technique to try and get that front end to bite, get it to rotate as best as they possibly can. DRS lap is open for the Williams car, barreling towards the line. Will it be an improvement for Nico Source? No, it is not. Down by 200s. I don't think anybody else is finding any time. Finlay's off in the pickets in the grass coming out of Bica de Pato. Lawrence is on the track, but I don't think that Mercedes is improving. I think he's already made his improvement and made his move in this session. Oscar is going again, so he's obviously backed off to try and find a little bit of track space, recharge the battery, so it might still be possible for the champion to steal this right at the last. This could be the ultimate buzzer beater. Lafferty thought he had it. 106.4. What can Oscar do? He takes it away by some tune as well. 106.3. Lafferty thought he had it. He bested the two McLarens before Oscar said, no, I'm going again. And he does take it off the hands of Lafferty. Commendable effort from the RB. Dirk is coming round the final corner, but he is not improving and will send that Scarlet car into the pit lane at full pelt. And we'll start on the back row. But that is the mark of a champion, isn't it? You make a mistake, but you correct it and you rectify it right at the very end.
That was his banker lap, a low 5, and that does send that indication he had much more to give, and he did in the end, a convincing pole position to the tune of 800ths of a second from Lafferty. Still a great effort from the RB and Volokogan, recovering his session very nicely for third. Marius Formula maybe more disappointed than anyone. He seemed to have pole position pace, ends up with 4th position in the end from Lawrence and P5 and Matteo in 6th. What could have been for him as well? Finlay in at P7 in the end, less than 2/10 off the pole position. Then it's Evan Knight, Nico Soss and your own rounding out the top 10, then Dirk and Fraser rounding out the grid. Very close, very competitive, as we tend to see at this Interlagos circuit. Always produces banger qualifying sessions and typically races as well. We'll see how that's going to go ahead of us as we head ourselves into it very soon. Looks to be nice and dry for the events going on in front of us. So 36 laps of Interlagos coming up soon. Oscar 4 in a row for pole positions, and he looks to end this season in the position where he is in the standings. He wants to try and stamp his authority on this grid once again.
He's become accustomed to first place, hasn't he? Whether it's qualifying or the race, and looking to do the same. Thank you for reading out the grid there, because obviously, absolutely brilliantly, didn't come up on my screen. We just had the wonderful black screen, so turned into a podcast ever so briefly. But we do know the grid order, and I can show you it very quickly, actually, if we head over to the race director. There is it in visual form if you missed it, because the game decided that we didn't actually want to show us the lap times either. So cheers for that one. We've got Lawrence in the chat saying can do a 105.5 at Austria. I mean, that's not a terrible lap time at Austria, it has to be said. It's not brilliant, it has to be said also. But yeah, I think 105, from what I've seen in time trial, is possible. The Vardenator agreeing high 105 possible if you absolutely nail the lap. We weren't particularly close to that, but Oscar was eventually a class above in the session. But that was a lap that surprised me from Lafferty.
Yeah, he has pulled out big laps at the end of sessions before, so he is capable of doing so. That was a big shock though, and it does show though a lot of these drivers around a track like this, it comes down a lot more to execution sometimes than just raw pace. If you put it all together when it matters most, you can really spring a surprise around a track as short as this and the margin's so close, and pulling that one out of the bag, as well as Volokongan too. He struggled all session and manages to get himself very close to a front row. So big time performances late in the day, that is what we love to see in an F1 qualifying session. Always that slugfest when we get to the end of proceedings. We'll see how the race is going to follow suit. We won't get that classic Interlagos rain, but hopefully we're going to get 36 laps of absolute drama to hopefully end this season on a high.
We'll get cracking very shortly. You can see in the bottom right there, Sim Racing Setups. Make sure you check it out. Link is in the description. simracingsetups.com. Go over there and pick up the Pro F125 setups to try and get the best performance you possibly can, not just out of yourself, but out of your equipment as well. We wait for the fuel loads as well as the strategies to be applied. No changes to the setup. That is why Parc Ferme is back on, so nobody can do any cheeky adjustments to their setup between qualifying and the race. That is a big no-no, as it is in real life, of course. We do wait. Strategy should be a standard one-stop. Fairly sure that'll be the comfortable one, although maybe you could make a two-stop work if we do see a safety car, which is very much possible here at Interlagos. For the final time then in season 40, it's round 11. The championship has been decided, but the victor here in Brazil is still yet to be seen. It's McLaren versus RB on the front row. Bit of a sort of shaky start from the pair of them, it has to be said. Wheel spin for both of them, and Volokonga says thank you very much, helping himself around the outside. Lafferty could be relinquishing that second place right from the word go. Volokonga does muscle his way up into P2. Maris Formula desperately trying to hold on to places. Look at the champion of previous seasons, Armateo, battling away with Lawrence to try and get up inside the top 5. Best start of the season for Lawrence, it has to be said. Down inside we go into Decida Largo. I think the Aston Martin's going to have the high ground, trying to dangle it around the outside goes Lawrence, but does have to relinquish P5 for the time being. It's Papai ruling out in front, first and second for Oscar and Volokonga.
Lawrence looking this way and that, trying to get around Armateo. Nothing doing at the moment though. His teammate though lunges at Finlay, heading down into the middle sector then on the outside of Pinarino. How's the traction going to be on that high line in the end? He has to seat that on the exit as well. Still searching into Pico de Pato. These drivers running oh so close out then, and a lot of these turns open up on the entry that gives the room for moves from distance. So these drivers are having goes at it and trying to move up the order. Fraser doing the same, attacking your own. Of course, the tyres that these guys are starting on is playing into that as well. Mario's Formula in P4 has opted for the hards and done very well to keep his position, stay nice and close at the front too, not being gapped at all by that leading trio. He's off to a great start. The other hard rider of your own, no such good fortune though. He's disposed of by Fraser, moves up into position number 11 on the road. He will try and chase after those in front of him. Finlay coming under pressure still from Evan Nye. These guys running very, very close though. The field not spreading out down to Dirty Air, as that's I think the longest we've ever gone in a stream without mentioning Dirty Air up to this point. I think close on 40 minutes, so well done to us. But it is Oscar leading the way from Volokonga, things starting to settle down, but the field running very, very close. No one really struggling to hang on. It's actually been a fairly calm start amongst the entire field, and Oscar holding things together at the front, his teammate backing him up, and the rest of the grid very close in contention.
Yeah, Volokonga was lucky there. Didn't have a very good run through Decida de Largo. Was a bit deep going into turn number 4, but Lafferty was a little bit too far behind to make any real impression on the run up the hill into Ferradura, which is an ambitious overtaking opportunity, but if you get your car alongside, very possible to pull off what will probably go down as overtake of the race. It has to be said. Lafferty equidistant between himself, Volokonga and Marius Former, and back to Armateo, who's coming under significant pressure from Lawrence in the Mercedes. Traded blows on the opening lap. Is Lawrence thinking about a move up the inside into turn 1? No, he is not. Armateo not too far away from the Alpine and Maris Formula either. And a bit of a wobble coming through the curve at De Sol could leave him open to attack as the DRS flaps open for both cars, but Lawrence certainly has the overspeed. The other Mercedes on the move as well. Evan Nye trying to find a way past the Haas of Finlay, looking this way and that, but braver on the brakes is Finlay. Maybe a little bit too brave there as he falls off the circuit, and Evan Nye says thank you very much. You've heard of buffet bowling. Well, that was buffet driving. Help yourself stuff.
Yeah, braking far too late as Finlay in the end not able to get that car rotated around turn number 4 at Decida de Largo. So through goes Evan Nye. He's been pressuring for that position. Both the Mercedes, in fact, have been on the move earlier on in this race, and the second of the Mercedes now will try and close his way up towards the rest of this train. So Finlay not quite finding the race pace out there, settling down into position number 8 for the moment. Still a full train of the entire field. No real dramas on the first lap, surprisingly, and amazingly for this grid, no retirements too after the end of the first couple of laps. So give them a round of applause, but we'll see if that's going to remain that way in the laps to come as we head towards the end of the third tour of Interlagos. Still Oscar leading the way from Volokonga, followed by Lafferty, and it seems like these hard runners are really settling in nicely now. Marius Formula has conceded nothing in terms of ground, came under very little pressure, it has to be said, from Armateo behind, and you'd imagine the longer this stint wears on, the more and more he's going to come into things and then maybe even begin to pressure the 3 drivers in front.
And you wonder if there was maybe a bit of a missed opportunity for Marius Formula on the opening lap. Yes, his tyres would have been a little bit colder than the drives around, but both Oscar and Lafferty had terrible launches. Massive wheel spin for the pair of them off the line. Volokonga lapping that up, moving up into second place at the expense of Lafferty. I wonder if Marius Formula, maybe if he was a little bit punchier on the opening lap, could have maybe got himself in between those 2 cars in front, or maybe even in between the 2 McLarens. It would have been a tall order starting from 4th, but nothing is ever impossible, especially with Marius Formula. Pulls off some very nice overtakes if you've been watching PSGL, not just in PSL F1 tier, but in a couple of tiers below as he was working his way through the ranks. Things starting to fan out a little bit. The gap's moving out to sort of 4 or 5 or even 6 tenths per second in some cases, rather than 2 or 3 tenths that we were seeing in the first 2 or 3 laps. As people just try to get into a rhythm, look after the tyres as well. When you are in this DRS train, obviously you've got to deal with the dirty air, so just keeping those front tyres in particular alive around this circuit is very important. Dirt very close to the back of Finlay, probably the closest battle we've got on track at the moment.
Yeah, can he get a good run heading out of the centre S? He's also under-fueled, by the way, his yellow fuel light on, so we'll see if that's going to work in his favour near the end of the race. Of course, with every car having DRS, unless the car in front has drained the majority of their battery reserves, providing much pressure for an overtake is very difficult indeed, and Dirk not able to quite make his way through as of yet. I'm very excited to see Mario's formula, though, in the laps to come. He's drawing ever nearer to Lafferty out there. Lafferty, of course, not having much space to drive into because the McLaren of Vollekongen is just up the road, but Mario's formula is working his way very nicely into this race. He'd love to get into a track position too, to stave off the inevitable undercut of some of the medium runners out then. So he's applying as much pressure as he can, seeing if he can try and get the RB in front to crack. Lafferty, of course, coming off the back of, well, a very good result just a few weeks ago in Suzuka. Right now he's looking at another podium, having to keep the Alpine driver behind though. He's using a lot of battery, so Marius Formula maybe thinking about sending a move, but seems like setups are a bit of a, well, not making much of a difference then. Seems like similar wing levels in Marius Formula, unable to quite close in at the moment. So as long as these drivers are managing their battery okay, looks as though they're able to stave off any pressure from behind.
And what we should mention, starting to come to fruition, but the hard tyre around this circuit is a really, really strong race tyre. You can really lean on it. You don't struggle with the grip that you do if you're running. Sometimes the C1 tyre on this game can be a little bit horrible to try and make it work and make it far up. So Marius Formula on a good compound here, and if he can try and make this work for the first 50% of the race at least, he could set himself up very, very nicely for a late race assault at that leading group, the two McLarens and Lafferty and anybody else, when they undercut the Alpine of Mario's Formula. A bit of a gap formed between himself and Armatea behind, 6 tenths per second between the Alpine and the Aston Martin. He's managed to cool the assault from the two charging silver arrows for the time being at least, although Lawrence, if we know anything about him, which we do, he will not shy away from making an ambitious move into a heavy braking zone.
Certainly won't there, but yeah, Marius Formula does look the most likely driver to go on the offensive, but Lafferty's doing all the right things, using his battery in all the right places, and at the moment is able to keep him at bay. Marius Formula, unless he feels like sending one from distance, which he is capable of, he does close up on the brakes into the centre S. Can he get a better exit on the way out? Always difficult when you get right up behind the rear wing and that dirty air starts to hold you back. The car just seemingly goes straight on. So at the moment, he is still sitting in behind, closing towards Decina Delago. Looks towards the inside, but that's a short braking zone, and you can't really go from distance. He has a look, but ultimately not really coming too much. He is applying that pressure, applying that squeeze, and he did get Lafferty onto the defensive a little bit, gave him something to think about, but in the end, unable to move through. And this is why this hard to medium strategy typically on this game doesn't quite work. When you do have that pace on the medium runner, the medium tyre is not typically a very good tyre at most circuits in this game, and the hard is a superior race tyre, as Tom alluded to earlier on. But right now, that extra pace seems to be being wasted on Marius Formula. He can't quite pick his way through, and at the moment he's being held back. He is able to get very close, mind you, heading out of Junshao. On this occasion, maybe he can swing a surprise, and maybe Lafferty is going to be very much under pressure this time. He's got a bit more battery than the charging Alpine. That may serve him well, but he's going to have to try and cover towards the inside. Marius Formula looks there, breaks a little bit later, draws alongside, and there's contact between the RB and the Alpine. Marius Formula, I think, knowing he has to cede that, he pushed Lafferty well off his line then. He's trying to go again, but without the battery, surely nothing doing heading in to the end of the first sector. So that was one attack thrown, but in the end just misjudged, and he has to settle back into P4.
He does. Interestingly as well, look at the bottom. 2 pit stops made incredibly early. Evan Nye getting shot of his medium tyres. The same for Finlay in the Haas. They're running, I believe, in 7th and 8th place, so directly in the middle of this DRS train that hadn't really broken up. It has now, though, because Dirk has been left in a bit of a sticky situation. 1.3 seconds off the back of Lawrence. Around a circuit like this, you've got one very long DRS straight and then another one in about 20 seconds later coming out of the centre S's and through the curve of the Sol. So if you do fall out of the DRS range, you've really got to make make work of that middle sector, you've really got to push very hard, try and get back into the 1 sec, because you can just start leaking more and more time. This run out of Jung Shao as well, very, very critical to the lap time. He has just dipped back under 1 second. Did he get it when he crossed the DRS detection point? Yes, he did, just about. And into the pits comes Volokon and Lafferty. So these medium runners getting rid of the tyres very, very early.
Amara's formula, very, very delightfully for him, finally has clean air to work into, and he's going to try and make these hard tyres work. But the hard tyre is going to be the choice for many, many drivers on this grid, and we'll see how powerful that undercut is going to be. Oscar is still out there. Dirk is elected to extend as well, trying to make use of his clean air out on the track. So a lot of drivers now. It's been a very busy pit lane at the end of the 8th lap, and let's see how those drivers who came at the end of the 7th lap are going to be faring. Evan Nye looks to have gained quite substantially out of this. He's going to come out very close to Lafferty. There they are, emerging pretty much wheel to wheel on the pit exit then, and Lafferty is just about going to manage to see him off. But that undercut working very nicely. Finlay just run out of it by Armateo in the end, but still managing to get himself in the mix and jump ahead of Lawrence too. So very effective, just that extra lap on the hards. The medium tyres are already fading out there as Finlay has a look at Mateo, trying to take advantage of warm tyres, in the end not quite coming off. So that undercut very, very potent, and could that spell trouble for the champion who dives to the pit lane at the end of lap 9?
It could, but critically, Lafferty's had an absolute shocker in the pit lane. Remember, he was right underneath the rear wing of Volokonga when he came into the pits. Now he's 2 seconds off the back of the second McLaren. So while he was very, very tentative coming into the pits, maybe got held up in his box by a couple of other drivers. That will have to wait to see what happened there. But he is now under some significant pressure from Evan Nye. He's got himself in between the RB and the Aston Martin of Armour 10. There's a lot of heavy lifting now Lafferty's going to have to do to try and get himself back into the race with the 2 McLarens. Down the inside, I think Armour 10 trying to nab 7th place on the road from Evan Nye. There's no contact, darting around the outside of 2. Inside became the outside through the centre S's, and that is picture book stuff from the recently deposed champion. Oscar's going to filter out behind his teammate, so it's Volokonga now leading this race. That might provide a little bit of relief for Lafferty if he can get his skates on. Oscar now over a second off the back of his teammate, but Armateo getting a shift on and pushing the Mercedes of Evan Nye back down a spot.
Evan Nye trying to capitalise back, but ultimately unable to quite do so. And yeah, I think you're right about Lafferty, because Oscar, he does get jumped by his teammate, but ultimately still very much in the game. He's fighting for DRS still, and the 2 McLaren boys, the Woking boys, are going at it once again at the front of PSF1. Oscar, though, working his way back in, and I wonder if this is already going to be the battle up at the front of the grid decided. It depends on what kind of pace Lafferty can muster, but Oscar has flown on this lap, already bridged across towards his teammate. He's going to have DRS, and the 2 McLarens are clear and away at the front. There's still one man, I think, who wants to try and be chasing them. It is the Aston Martin of Mateo, drawing nearer to Lafferty, and Lafferty not defending the inside line. I think these guys may be trying to engage in something of a relay. It doesn't happen much on this game. We saw it all the time on F124, trying to swap places and gain, kind of leapfrogging each other and gaining momentum down the ends of the straight. So Lafferty giving that up to Mateo. Mateo going for 2 seconds is the gap. Oscar coming right across towards his teammate. The 2 McLarens through that pit cycle, firmly now in control of this Grand Prix, and the question is, can that chasing group live with them or even reel them in?
I don't know if you were watching Armateo going through Descida de Lago. Lost the back end 2 times. He is really pushing, hustling that Aston Martin, trying to extract as much pace as he possibly can from his machinery and from himself, because he knows that he is up against it. He's leading this chariot race 2 seconds off the back of the 2 McLaren drivers, who can just, well, try and put themselves in a bit of a stalemate at the moment, work together, try and continue to bridge this gap, extend this gap to the group behind. And you were talking about DRS sharing. We saw it a lot in the last game. I don't think I can actually remember a time in F125 in any form of league racing that I've seen DRS sharing actually work successfully. I don't think that's what Lafferty's plan was either, because I think he realises that he hasn't got the pace of the 2 McLarens in front. Armateo might have the pace to try and drag them all along. That's what he's hoping is going to happen.
But at the moment, the gap, at the very least, doesn't seem to be going down, and Oscar actually pumping in a purple lap on that last lap, then a 109.5, just about a half a tenth quicker than what Mateo managed on the last lap. So at the moment, it doesn't seem to be trending that way. Mateo's going to keep himself in the hunt. Of course, he's still fighting for his pride as the season 39 champion, and a 3-time champion of PSF1 is not going to go out down without a fight. But at the moment, the McLaren drivers still very much in control. Update further back in the train, Lawrence fought his way past Finlay. It was a great scrap on that last lap, heading through the middle sector then, and Lawrence managing to squeeze the Haas driver out, heading through Pinarino. What that does do, though, is that it put him on the edge of that DRS range, and he's fighting on hard himself, trying to work his way back into play, grab himself a little bit of DRS and go with him. With the speed that Mateo's demonstrating at the front of the field, it's not an easy task. He's right on the edge of that 1 second, looks as though he's managed to save it, but he may be dropping Finley out of that range as well. And Nico Sauce may be thinking, thank you very much, I will take that one away. Can he catapult himself up towards the front? Seems as though Lawrence, though, has run out of battery and his straight line speed is faded. Further down the road, though, it's a big lunge for the Williams driver. He's going to get it stopped and turned in. Finley looking for that switchback round the outside of turn 2. They bang wheels a little through the apex, and Nico Sauce is sent backwards, his momentum gone, and Fraser now all over the back of him, trying to follow his teammate through to the inside, and he has much more battery than Nico Sauce and glides through. Nico Sauce trying to fight it on the brakes. In the end, he spears off the road, losing the rear of the car, re-emerging, but that's been a tumultuous start to lap 13 for the Williams driver, and he is now cut adrift at the back of the field. So Lawrence up in front worked his way back in, immediately distanced again with no battery. Finley and Fraser both in the wars with Nico Sauce, and those 4 drivers cut from the rest of this train now.
Yeah, he was incredibly committed into turn 1, backfiring. He was actually ghosted for a very small period as well. And then there was a contact between himself and Fraser. A bit of a miscommunication there. Looked like he got a bit of a shove going up to the apex as Nico Sauce tried to dangle it around the outside and then find himself cascading over the bumps off the circuit, which is not the ideal line that you want to be taking through to see the Liger. Interestingly, though, as the 2 McLarens are going to trade blows here, Oscar definitely with a little bit more pace in hand over his teammate and a lap fresher tyres. The gap between the 2 McLarens and Armateo has been cut down by half a second in the last couple of laps, and Lafferty going with Armateo every single step of the way, and Evan Knight just clinging onto the coattails of the pair of them as well. So they are starting this leading group of 5 cars that have made their stops to converge on each other again ever so slightly, although Evan Knight does have DRS, going down the retro posture. I thought he had fallen out of the 1 second window just for the time being there, but he is just clinging onto it, might be about to fall out on this lap. But Armateo's got the bit between his teeth. The recently deposed champion looking to end the season on a high. He's got some serious pace.
He is demonstrating some awesome pace out there and distancing the very impressive Evan Nye and the rest of this train, it must be said, bar Lafferty, who's sticking with him very nicely. Those 2 guys have plenty of speed in hand, and Oscar at the front, I think he did have the speed over his teammate. He does have a lap fresher tyres, and he's immediately getting to work and pushing Volakongan right to the edge of that 1 second. Volakongan, now we saw him in this position in the Japanese Grand Prix when he was trying to hang on to Lafferty as a Mario's Formula pits very early from the lead off of those hard tyres, and it makes me wonder if we're actually going to see a 2-stop here. We did see very early pit stops off the medium tyres as well, so we could see actually some strategic variation in this race. He is going to put on a set of mediums. Your own followed him in as well. Those tyres will not get to the end of the race, I can say that for an absolute certainty. So tyre wear maybe a little bit high around this circuit, and we may be seeing some different strategies out there. Fraser joins his teammate with a track limits penalties. Lafferty closes down towards Mateo, but not going through just yet. As Oscar's gone to the front of that train, it's making things a bit more difficult for these 2.
100%. But a regulation 2 stop, I'll have a bit of that, thank you. Especially if Durkheim in front is going to try the 1 stop. This will be 15 laps on his set of medium tyres. The only problem is he has been caught first by the 2 McLaren cars, 1.5 seconds off the back of the Scarlet Ferrari, and then a further 2 seconds back is the Armateo Lafferty Evan Nye fight. Things fanning out further back. Lawrence in a bit of no man's land, 2 seconds behind his teammate, over a second ahead of the 2 Haas cars that are dueling, along with Nico Sauce, who's cruised up to the back of that pair after his little off a few laps ago. Marius Fulmer, I should say, has been spat out of the pits in P11 on his set of medium tyres. Like you said, they are not going to be able to go to the end of this Brazilian Grand Prix. Yes, Dirk is diving into the pit lane, gets out of the way, but does give Oscar some free DRS for his troubles. And we're now going to see if Dirk can try and make these hard tyres last 21 laps to get him to the end of the race.
Going to be a Herculean task, but he's already done one, to be fair, on those medium tyres. A very good job of taking them all of that distance, but the issue is the amount of time that he gave up in the last few laps of that stint, being reeled in rapidly by those 2 McLarens. Those 2 McLarens, by the way, are now gapping Armateo rather considerably. Mateo burning through his battery reserves pretty much. He's done an excellent job up to this point, but with Oscar now leading the way, that gap is trending the wrong way for the Aston Martin driver, and Evan Nye trying to work his way back into that group as well. It's been hovering on the edge of 1 second for quite a few laps now, so the race beginning to spread itself out in this mid phase of the race, but certainly a delight that we are going to see some different strategies out there. Finlay has gone off the track heading out of Pinarino. He's had a bit of a tumultuous season season, to be honest. He re-emerges just in front of your own, but now cut adrift of the train, and you sense he's going to have to do something wild on strategy, like Dirk is trying potentially to get himself back on track in his race. So the race spreading out even further out then, gaps after a very tight-knit DRS train. A lot of drivers teetering on the edge of that 1 second window, and really only the top 2 and 3rd and 4th on the road are bucking that trend at the moment. Marius Formula sets the fastest lap of the race on his mediums. Let's see how he can charge his way through on that certain 2-stop. So the hards on most of these guys probably aren't going to go to the end, so we are going to see some different strategies, and that pit lap then could be very crucial in the outcome of this race come the checkered flag.
100%, especially when you've got 2 teammates out in front that are line astern, and Oscar, you would imagine, will probably have the better strategy. Volokong is going to have to get a little bit creative here, maybe be proactive rather than reactive to what his teammate does ahead of him. It was interesting actually from Volokong because he got very close to his teammate down to turn 1, and then maybe just got put off a little bit by the closing speed he had. He was deep going through turn 1, then took a lot of the curb through the Curve de Sol. Had a bit of a wobble as well, which is why he's not particularly close through the middle set. So Volokong are definitely not cruising in the DRS of his team, it has to be said, and they have managed to stop the Armateo charge, and the recently deposed champion has definitely just run out of steam, and his charge has very much cooled. Was down to 1.4 seconds 5 laps ago, now up to 3 seconds between the 2 McLaren cars and the Aston Martin in P3. Evan Nyes also dropped off the face of the earth in respect to the battle for the final spot on the podium. Was right with Armateo and Lafferty, now 2 seconds off the back, but hasn't had his teammate catch him at all, it has to be said. Still 2 seconds between them as Armateo is going to lose out on 3rd place. Lafferty very sensibly, I think, getting past as he has got considerably more pace, and Armateo's tyres seemingly have absolutely fallen off a cliff because his pace out of nowhere has completely vanished.
It has indeed, but that was very deliberate actually. Actually backed off the throttle completely to allow the RB driver through, although he may have picked up a warning there on the outside of Ferradura. He carries on nevertheless in that Aston Martin, and his charge comes to an end. Another driver's charge is very much on. Marius Formula again going off strategy. He's up behind SCI Fraser and making quick progress. He's already picked up Nico Sauce on this lap, and look at the grip he has. Fraser is all over the road, and that's easy pickings for the man from Cyprus, cruising through into position number 7. He wants to get a gap out of Jun Xiao though to ensure that DRS doesn't come into play and he won't be pressured. Fraser has managed to stay close to him, and maybe looking to try and pot and prod at the Alpine Marius Formula, I think putting that to bed with a huge dump of his battery in the end, seeing him off, and actually Nico Sauce maybe threatening Fraser himself in the end, not quite drawing near enough. So Marius Formula picks off 2 drivers in 1 lap. We'll see how that strategy is going to work for him, and I think he'll be quite grateful that instead of a DRS trying to work his way through, he's got drivers seemingly running their own race, including those 2 Mercedes just out in front of him. So ape together, strong as they say, but ultimately these drivers separated should be much easier pickings for the Alpine on the move.
And I wonder what the strategy from here is for Marius. Does he try and go for a really short middle stint here, try and undercut his way right up to the 2 McLarens, or will it just be a case of seeing how close he can get to the 2 McLaren cars, seeing how quickly he can work his way through the traffic? Maybe if he can get ahead of the 2 Mercedes cars, that's where we'll see him starting to decide the way to go forward for Marius Formula, who is still very much a contender to try and pick up the win in this Brazilian Grand Prix, despite being 9.5 seconds off the leaders at this stage. 8 tenths between Oscar and Volokong. Volokong hasn't really got very close to his teammate in the last couple of laps after he got very close, almost ran to the back of him into the CNRS's a few laps ago. And Armateo continuing to struggle here. It's actually Lafferty who's making a fairly decent impression behind Volokong, and that gap has stabilised at about 3.5. Armateo really struggling to stay anywhere near the RB, and I think it's only a matter of time before he falls out of his DRS.
He may want to try and pit before that becomes too much of an issue. We're getting towards that window where a hard stint to the end is going to be viable. Maybe a medium, we shall see, but I think these drivers may be favouring the hard later on in this race. We shall see though, there may be different ways these drivers can go. Lap 20 of the race, so we're getting towards that business end. Marius Formula still in the charge. He's up behind Lawrence, heading into this technical middle sector. Can he pick a way through against the Mercedes driver? Dirty air through Ferradura isn't going to do him much good. Won't be quite as potent through these slow corners, and that extra mechanical grip is going to serve him a lot of good. Pico Tapato's always a good hunting ground for a lunge, but he's not near enough to really pressure the rear end of that Alpine, stepping out on the brakes too. He, I think, is going to be waiting for the clearest cut opportunity on the run down towards the line. It looks as though he should be able to pull that one off. Lawrence has not quite been able to bridge across Marius Formula, again losing the rear of the car though. Maybe a bit too much rearward brake bias, can't quite keep that car on the straight and narrow, and it seems as though he is going to be unable to bridge across that gap because he doesn't quite have that battery, so maybe frustrated for a little bit longer. Let's see if he can pick his way through though on the run down the retro post. If he gets a cleaner exit and learns a little bit off the optimal lane, it may be enough for Mario's Formula now, dumping the last of his battery, and critically Lawrence has nothing for himself, so Mario's Formula maybe a little bit later than he wanted to, picks him off, and that's another possession. He now runs P6.
Definitely one straight too late for Marius Formula. Really messy. I think we're just seeing the limitations of the wheel flicking technique, you have to say, because you're putting a lot of faith in the rear of your car to listen and to abide by what you're asking it to do. And we saw a couple of occasions there, especially in qualifying as well, where the rear of that Alpine was not doing what Marius Formula was asking. He was very, very, well, I think a bit of a hairy moment, Code Brown moment a couple of times, definitely going through Jung Shao. He's been struggling through that corner quite significantly, it has to be said. Nice little battle shaping up behind there. Fraser ahead of Nico Source with Jeroen, who might also be going for the one-stop here. Same strategy as Dirk. 12 seconds off the lead on 6-lap-old hard Cobb Pantai. So just watch this space with the kick Sauber. Cruised up to the back of the Williams and the Haas will be desperate to try and dispose of them, pick them off one by one as quickly as he possibly can.
Yeah, he's not in an optimal position now with this DRS train, but he's only a quarter of a second shy of Nico Sauce. Maybe he can use his extra grip for a dive in the braking zone. That looks like exactly what he's at. Got big dive in towards turn number 1. Can he get that one stopped? He runs a little bit wide, but Nico Sauce not quite able to finish off that switchback move. So it's a good move for your own, and Fraser should be considerably easier to pick off. It looks like he's going to try and get this done right away. Looking to the inside of turn number 4, braking late once again, and in the end just squeezes his way through. Fraser is forced off the track. Will he be too happy with that? I'm not sure. But your own picks off 2 cars in very short order. Great guns from the Kick-Sauber driver. He's on his way further up the road too. Marius Formula did manage to pick off Evan Nye. So another good move to go in the books for him. 4 seconds shy of the group in front. The mediums, he is going to start to feel it. He's making little errors all over the place, struggling to keep that car on the road. But he's chowing down at the drivers in front. Clearly got plenty of pace underneath that car, but we're getting towards that final pit phase, you would think, and so which driver is going to be the first to pull the pin here?
Well, it's going to be interesting. Will it be Marius Formula? Because the last 3 laps, he hasn't made any impression on the 2 McLarens because of the progress that he's had to make. And as I say that, he does dive into the pits, but it is absolutely criminal. Everybody in the second half of the field deciding now is the exact lap they want to come in. But Marius Formula is now thrown out of contention, courtesy of that 10-second penalty for speeding in the pits. He was trying to pull off the undercut. I think he had to do it because now he's being held in the pits as well. It goes from bad to worse. He just about re-emerges ahead of Evan Nye, but that is his chance gone. Because he spent a little bit too much time making his way through the 2 Mercedes cars. It meant that once he arrived to the rear end of Lawrence's car, the gap was 9.5 seconds. Got it down to 9 flat, and then by the time he'd got past the pair of them, it was 9.5 again. So he hadn't made any impression. So he had to try something else to try and get some track position, try and get a little bit of time over the 2 McLarens. The problem is, A, he sped into the pits, and B, he was held up in his box.
Yeah, double whammy of disasters for Marius Formula, and he's certainly going to be out of contention for a win out on track now. Is there going to be a lot of reactionary pit stops though? The 2 McLarens are still out there, and Volokon grabbed the undercut the last time out, but Oscar making sure that is not the case, and that's a very smart move, because it does mean that now Volokongen is probably going to be dropping out of his DRS unless he drops an absolute stunner of an in-lap. So critical times in the race for Volokongen. Lafferty deciding to go in as well, doing exactly the same thing to Matteo, who may find himself distanced as well in that 3rd place group. So drivers up at the front of those trains electing to pull the pin, and with much fresher tyres now underneath Oscar, I would suspect he should be able to put Volokongen out of range. Volokongen will have fresher tyres come the end of the race, but I feel like unless he drops a stunning end lap here, this may be going the way of the champion.
100%. Just watch out for Jeroen and Dirk, though. You'd imagine they are still on that one stop. Oscar's 8 seconds off the back of the Kick-Sauber, who I think we can technically say is the net race leader at this point. I'm fairly sure 9 laps into that hard tyre stint. They've done 15 in this middle phase, the McLarens and the other leading contenders. Surely you're going to try and extend that to the end of the race. Maybe go hang for a bit of a safety car. There's definitely an opportunity to finish inside the top 5 for Jeroen and for Dirk in this race, although Oscar's taken a massive chunk of time out of the Ferrari in particular on this lap. Lafferty 6 seconds off the back of Oscar as Volokongen does indeed make his way into the pits, and Armateo will follow suit. So Jeroen will now take over the lead of this race. Ahead of Dirk and Oscar will be your top 3, and Volokongen should feed out somewhere between his teammate and the RB of Lafferty.
One would think that's a 6 seconds window to get himself into. How close is he going to be? Can he possibly make that lap difference in terms of tyres in his favour work? But that gap is going to be considerable, it looks like, as the McLaren driver is going to emerge well behind his teammate. He isn't under immediate pressure from Lafferty, however, but that is the power of just a one-lap undercut. Look at that gap, out to about 3 seconds, and I imagine that Matteo is going to follow suit. Not quite as far adrift on this occasion from Lafferty, and with 2 seconds back, he may even fancy his chances as Evan Nye picks off Mario's Formula further down the road, so repaying the favour to the Alpine. These guys now running on the exact same tyres, so the strategy's kind of coming around there for those two. It hasn't been Mario's Formula's night, it has to be said. Oscar, though, already chasing down Dirk, and well, this is a bold one-stop attempt from these guys. Ultimately, in terms of the win, it doesn't seem like it's going to reward them much. With the field quite spread out, though, just maybe, as Tom said, they can salvage what could be a top 5. I don't think Dirk is going to have much of a prayer here, though. Oscar is going to sweep to the outside. 1 down, 1 to go, with a 4-second gap to your own and much fresher tyres. He sets the fastest lap of the race, and it should be, I imagine, a fairly routine pursuit for the champion.
It should be, but what's going to be interesting for Jeroen and Dirk is, can they try and maximise their race time, try and pick up as many little straights where they can get DRS as possible as certain cars come through. Dirk doing it there, picking up the DRS from Oscar in front. How close can he stay in the middle sector? I would imagine he's going to fall outside 1 second very quickly, probably through turns 6 and 7, to be honest. That's how much more grip the McLaren of Oscar has got. 8 lap fresher tyres than the Ferrari behind. You can see there the gap extending by 0.3 of a second, and already Dirk is up against it to try and stay within the 1 second window. That's not necessarily his aim for the time being. He just wants to try and make the most of when cars overtake you. You want to maximise the time that you can gain out of those cars. Oscar has a little bit of a wobble coming through Beacon of Pato.
Yeah, I mean, definitely ceding that position heading into towards the Senna S, not a bad move. You do essentially guarantee yourself a little bit of a helping of DRS, but yeah, without the raw pace to really hold it for very long, Oscar has taken 2 full seconds out of Jeroen in this lap, who actually dives to the pit lane, so maybe just going a bit irregular on strategy, maybe thinking, yeah, I'm not going to be able to extend these tyres without a serious risk of a puncture, and Jeroen is elected not to go all in, maybe realising that the chance of the win was in the end out of play, so he goes in for a set of the medium tyres, but way down in terms of track position. We'll see how those mediums serve him. He can try and get up towards that train led by Evan Nye potentially, but doesn't seem like much more of that is going to go his way. Dirk is still out there. We'll see if he commits to a potential one stop and tries to hold off for as long as he can. Mario's Formula picks off Evan Nye down the run, down towards the Cena del Lago, moves up into position number 6, but of course that penalty holding him back substantially. Jeroen out in P11. Maybe there was just a huge puncture risk and he's decided to play percentages. Not exactly sure why you would given the current circumstances, but he's out there P11, some way adrift of the train in front, benefiting a bit from penalties at the moment potentially, but how much pace can he muster up with slightly fresher mediums under his belt?
I think he's probably seen the advantage that these drivers have. The tyre offset and the tyre delta is enormous. Oscar nearly 3.5 seconds clear of Dirk. Volokong is going to blast past the Ferrari as well, who will get some DRS going down the Retroposta. Now further 3 seconds back to Lafferty, and then he'll be looking at Mario's Formula critically with that 10-second penalty. How long will it take the Alpine and the group behind with the 2 Mercedes and the Haas of Fraser, who also has a penalty, to catch Dirk as his tyres begin to fade away and they just whittle away lap after lap at the gap between themselves I should say, and the Ferrari of Dirk, currently holding P3. That is going to be a fascinating one, and also how much progress can Jeroen make. Mario's Formula, I mean, I respect the different strategies. He probably got it slightly wrong, and it's going to be interesting to see how Jeroen manages this, because we saw once those medium tyres, they were very quick at the start, but once the driver reached a little bit of traffic, just completely stalled out. And I wonder if Jeroen might find himself in a similar situation to what Mario's Formula did.
It doesn't seem like it takes very long for that offset in pace between the medium and the hards to completely fade away and flip on its head. I mean, Mario's Formula in the first stint, that was where his strategy went wrong. When he had that advantage of hards later on in the stint against aging medium tyres, he just got buried in the DRS train. It meant he couldn't take advantage of the part of the race where he was quicker. That's why that hard start typically just doesn't quite work in this game if you get buried in the pack. early on, you can't make the most of that pace. And ultimately, working against Mario's formula then in a penalty is going to do little good for his chances. Jeroen sets the fastest lap of the race, so at least at the moment, he does have plenty of pace to fight with. Big fight for the podium though coming up, because Mateo, to his credit, has put in a big shift in the last couple of laps and clawed his way back towards Lafferty, maybe using the fresher tyres. We're seeing actually how much of a difference it's making in terms of pace. It's a very surprising offset, and Volakongen even clawing a little bit closer to Oscar, so we'll keep an eye on that one. But Mateo, despite losing out big time with that overcut, has managed to reverse the damage straight away as Nico Sauce is off at Ferradura, and ultimately turning into a night to forget for the Williams driver. Shockingly, we still have 12 drivers left in the race, which seems very off colour for this grid. But yeah, big fight for the podium. Matteo has worked his way back in as they both close up towards Dirk, and how they navigate this Ferrari could be very key in how this battle unfolds.
Two-stop strategy, no retirements. What world are we living in? Dirk doing a really, really strong job here as they start lap number 30, but he's going to have to wave the white flag to the white RB that rolls through. Now it's third place for Lafferty. I think he's also going to roll out the red carpet for the Aston Martin of Mateo as well, and just try and stick like glue to the back of them for as long as he possibly can. Going to get a dose of DRS, the Ferrari, down the retro possible. Will he want to just let the Aston Martin of Mateo sail on past, because it's not really his fight at this stage with 6 laps to go? Holds firm in 4th for the time being. Mateo's going to be absolutely cursing this. He's just been cruising up to the back of Lafferty, putting in, like you said, an enormous shift, get back inside the 1 second window of the RB, and now he's just being pushed further and further away. He's got to send it surely at some point in this middle sector. Doesn't try it down the inside into turn number 8. Can he maybe try it into Bico de Pato, the next real overtaking opportunity? He's very, very close going through turn 9. Surely this is the opportunity. Dirt doesn't defend it, but Mateo doesn't really make any moves to the inside either.
Has so much more grip, and you can see it, and you can see the evidence in that gap to Lafferty. I mean, if Mateo has the pace that he's demonstrated in the last few laps, he can still get back across that gap, and he'll get a good catapult here with DRS too, as he'll easily dispatch of Dirk on the run down towards the line. So he peels out of the slipstream, opens up the DRS, and away he goes. He's going to get a few tenths back for his trouble, and it's going to be another pursuit of the RB. Should be a good fight for the podium. To the flag, he has a lot of fresher tyres. Can he make them work? So frustrations in navigating Dirk. I said it may have a big impact on the way this battle unfolds. Mateo not looking to take on any unnecessary risks though, and maybe that's a sign of confidence that he can actually bring this one, get back. The gap already down to 1.1 seconds. He takes a really nice line through the entry to the Cida del Lago, but then the rear tyres say no, and he has to do a lot of that work all over again. 1.2 is the gap. We're going to have to keep a very close eye on that battle. To the flag, it seems as though 1 and 2 are settled unless Oscar gets a penalty. That gap has stabilised, but Mateo fighting hard, trying to claw Lafferty back. That's a great scrap going on for the final podium place.
And then it is that top 5 race. Dirk still doing an incredibly commendable job on those hard compound tyres. He's not going to get the DRS from the Aston Martin of Mateo in front. 7 lap older tyres compared to the 2 behind. 8 lap older than Lawrence. Got to be careful of Jeroen as well on those medium tyres. Has stalled out a little bit though. The kick Sauber 2 seconds off the back of Fraser. Pumped in a fastest lap 3 or 4 laps ago, but ever since then hasn't made any real impression. The gap is 4 seconds. They are about a second a lap faster, maybe a little bit more over the Ferrari, but surely there is going to be a point. Obviously Dirt's tyres are getting worse, but as the tyres of the group behind get worse, we might find ourselves, when we get to 34 and 35, that things just start to not level out. But the difference between the pace, it is a second lap at the moment, it might just level out a little bit more, especially if the 2 Mercedes get embroiled in a battle with the penalty riding Alpine.
Yeah, they are charging down, just a couple of a tenth of a second separating those guys, but right now they seem content to ride the coattails of Mario's formula. It's a bit of a ticket towards chasing down Dirk, and right now they're gaining through penalties, so it's a good situation for that Mercedes pair at the moment, should they have enough laps to chase down at Dirk. Lawrence is trying to apply some pressure on his teammate too still, as they head nose to tail, heading through the very middle part of the lap. And up in front, Mateo has also worked his way back towards Lafferty. He seems to have plenty of pace in hand with the lap fresher tyres, and very critically I've been noticing he's definitely got the lower of the wings between the two. I mean, he was probably getting a bit of a slipstream from behind, but even still he was gaining substantially on the straight on the last lap when both of them were dumping a lot of their battery. So I think Lafferty is going to be at a disadvantage here in this battle, and Mateo knows it. He closes up right to the back of it, goes early to the inside Senna S. Big move from distance, and there's big contact too. Matteo, I think, knowing he has to cede that one, but nevertheless, he is going to get another chance on the run down towards turn 4. I think he may be realising that, though. Lafferty dumping his battery to stay out in front, and Matteo not making much effort then. That was a bit of a misguided effort, and with just over 3 laps to go, he'll go again to try and snatch that podium up cleanly.
100%. He was totally committed, shooting it up the inside into turn number 1, but I think sportingly there, realising that he just sent it a little bit too hot into turn number 1, barging Lafferty out of the way and just backing out of it, and also respectfully as well, not going for it again down the Retroposta and into Descida de Lago. Lafferty did burn a little bit of ERS there, so he probably would have been hoping that Matteo made it even clearer that he wasn't going to go for it on the run into turn number 4, but matters not, and we are still in the formation that we were on the previous lap. The gap between Dirk and Mario's formula is 2.5 seconds with 3.5 laps to go. You'd imagine that train of cars, they are going to catch the Alien Scarlet Ferrari car. It's now just going to be a matter of how quickly the Mercedes can work their way through the Alpine and the Ferrari. Obviously, Maris with that 10-second penalty isn't going to mess things up too much, but he could play Joker for a couple of laps, especially when they catch up. Another jink to the inside as Matteo thought about a move again, but this time wasn't quite close enough and didn't want to go barreling in there and barge the RB out of the way for the second lap of running.
Does he have enough of a run heading down towards the Descida de Lago? This used to be a prime strategy. Hold back once and get the DRS a second time, but it seems as though with the dirty air on this game, you can't follow near enough. And in the end, Matteo can't get the move done. So Lafferty proving to be a tough obstacle here for the Aston Martin driver. But just look at that gap close up as they head into Ferradura. Mario's formula picking up a penalty to compound his woes in this race. He's going to finish right at the rear of the field, or very close to it seems, and presumably very much out of the points, with Jeroen getting ever closer to this train, and Finlay just a few seconds off of it. Both Finlay and Nico Sauce have been off the road in this race, still fighting on out there, and to their credit, not actually deciding to call their night and their season to bed. But heading towards the final 2 laps of the championship, Oscar is away and gone. Volokong in 3 seconds adrift of him and Matteo. Is he going to try and pull this one off early here? DRS once again. Lafferty burning a lot of his battery early on the straight. Now the charge comes from the Aston Martin up towards the Senna S. This time he looks to the inside, breaks a little bit earlier. Lafferty squeezes it very tight to the inside apex. But Matteo, he's going to have a good run on the run towards the Descida de Lago, and you sense Lafferty isn't going to be able to fight him off. He's going to run out of battery too, and Matteo goes to the inside line, finds the gap, threads the eye of the needle, and the Aston Martin is through. Great racecraft from the pair of them. Great battling, it has to be said, but Matteo is going to go through, and he's got that move done, and without much battery to use, Lafferty will save some in that middle sector, but Matteo is going to open up, try all he can to work his way away and ensure no counter-attack on that final lap.
And that is the only question. Has he gone for it a lap too early? Because Matteo clearly has had the pace to get ahead of Lafferty, but has he opened himself up for a potential re-attack down into turn 1 or indeed turn 4 again from Lafferty on the final lap? Because with the gap as it is, I imagine Lafferty is not going to go for it into the centre S, but if he can just cozy himself up to the back of that Aston Martin through turns 1 and 2, he is going to give himself an opportunity down the Retroposta. Dirk has also been caught by the 2 Mercedes. Mario's formula went off at turn 1, handed 6th place on a plate to the 2 Mercs and to the Haas of Fraser, who's very much in this, but with a 3-second penalty is going to drop behind Jeroen and most likely finish in 9th place in this race. We start the last lap of the season. Lafferty not particularly close going through the centre S's. Ever Nye closing up to the back of Dirk very, very quickly. Dirk trying to make this one-stop work, begging, praying for those hard tyres to last. I don't think Lafferty's in the same stratosphere at the moment, and Matteo, the recently deposed champion at the moment, is comfortable in his pursuit of 3rd.
He is indeed. Dirk less comfortable, but he's managing to see off Evan Nye. He does run a little bit wide though, heading to the Descida de Lago, and there's going to be a battle uphill now towards Ferradura, but the Ferrari driver has the legs. He had just a little bit more battery to use, and he sees off Evan Nye. It's going to come down to the run to the line. Can the Ferrari make it work? It'd be very deserving with the strategy call he's gone for. Evan Nye is pressing him all the way throughout this middle sector. Dirk, can he stand up to the pressure up towards the line? He's going to have to cover him off once. He may lose out from DRS and around to the line. Dirk is giving this a great go though, and he's pulled off a great strategy here tonight.
Dirk is running on the rims, but very quickly we return to the top, and ascending to the top once again is Oscar, your champion, taking his familiar place right at the sharp end, and Papaya ruling clear as they have done for the last few races. A 1-2 with Volokong in 2nd and Matteo 3rd, but look at this, drag race to the line, 4 cars in the scrap. Dirk, can he pull off this strategy, begging for the line to come as quickly as it possibly can? He found the smallest of gaps to the inside in Evan Nye, but misses out by half a tenth. Lauren's a further a tenth and a half back. Then comes your own courtesy of Fraser's penalty. Fraser, desperately unlucky, missed out on 8th place by 28 milliseconds at the beam. Dirk, hats off with that strategy. The only drive that made the one-stop work, and after qualifying on the back row, finds himself nestled just about inside the top 5. But as we complete the season, it's fitting, isn't it? The McLarens first and second, and the champion atop the podium for the 4th time in 5 races.
Yeah, it has been an exhibition from those two boys from Woking. They have shared the podium in each of the last 4 rounds, and Oscar picking up his 4th triumph of the season. He's going to win this championship by, in the end, an overwhelming margin, it must be said. I believe with the extra pole position point, I think it's going to end up at 31 points. Ovola Kongan as well is going to be very far clear of the rest of PSF1. Of course, we know partially the reasons for that, and we addressed them at length, I think, earlier on in the stream, but you can't take anything away from Oscar, a very deserving champion. Volakongan second on the day. Great fight back from Matteo against Lafferty. Great battle between those two, with the Italian just coming out on top. And Dirk, well, certainly my driver of the day. I don't know about you, Tom, but stunning stuff. Managing those tyres beautifully. When we saw Jeroen go for the same strategy, in the end only finishing 3 seconds adrift, he was looking like he was going to good for more, though. He was ahead of Dirk on the road. Evan Nye, Lawrence, Jeroen, Fraser and Finley rounded the points finishes. Nico Sauce and Marius Formula outside of that. And that is... I'm not going to claim it was the greatest season ever, but it was a season now that is in the books. Of course, a week early, we will not be heading to Mexico City for the final event of the season. And in the end, it was, as the second half of this season has turned out, Tom, it was the McLaren show tonight.
As it has been in real life for the majority of 2025, it has to be said. Once the 2 other championship contenders fell by the wayside, both McLarens were almost flawless. Oscar, 4 wins out of the last 5 races. Volakongan on the podium for each one of them as well. And from a position where the top 3 in the constructors, you mentioned it right at the start of the stream, were separated by just 7 points, I think it was, with 6 races to go. The McLarens have probably won it by about 100 at this stage, courtesy of the Alpines and the Red Bulls falling off a cliff. We didn't even have any Red Bulls racing this evening. That is just how dominant the constructors' battle has been in the second half of the season. Fitting as well for Oscar to pick up that win right at the death, and he has been very, very impressive. Some might say that the championship was given to him with the absence of Alex Lofer and from Owen. I will say, shut up, because he was absolutely brilliant.
And, I would make a slight modification to that. Show up is what I would say to some of the other drivers in this tier. Again, like I said, Oscar and Volakongan, for that measure, they've both attended every single race in this season, and that has been reflected in their dominance in the standings in the end. So you can't really complain. It is just the way it goes. If you turn up, you're giving yourself a chance, and I think that Oscar has demonstrated. I mean, he's won 3 from the last 4 races, and certainly, I think, deserves his crown as the man on top on PlayStation at this stage. We'll see what happens in the near future. We're probably going to get quite a lot of, a bit of a purge, I should say, from some of these drivers in PSF1. We'll have to see what next season's grid is going to be looking at. Like, I suspect, very different from this season's grid. But it was the McLaren show. Again, circumstances notwithstanding, but you can't criticize those 2 guys for just simply doing their job and doing it better than everyone else out there.
That's their job, and they did it very, very well. And congratulations to Oscar. He picked up the championship last week and finishing strongly in a very familiar position, number 1. And that is it, though, for season number 40. Wasn't the most exciting. We did have some very good races. I think we ended it off strongly as well at the legendary Interlagos circuit that is over my left shoulder and will always be the greatest racing circuit in the history of F1. Before we go, history of all motorsport, actually. I will go that far as well. Make sure you check out Sim Racing Setups, the best in the business. Get your hands on those Pro F125 car setups developed by the very drivers you see racing week in, week out in Premier Sim Gaming Leagues, esports and stable setups available for every single circuit, whether it's qualifying or the race, whether it is dry or wet, they've got you absolutely covered. And with their optimal race strategies as well, everything available over at simracingsetup.com for £49.49. You can see the reviews on the right hand side of your screen there, and make sure you use the code PSGL at checkout to get 5% off your purchase. Remember, 24 circuits on this game. Divide £49.99 by 24 and you're getting yourself a very strong deal.
You are indeed, and as I said earlier, maybe you can find yourself on the PSF1 grid, and maybe, just maybe, you'll be seen at all 12 weeks in a PSGL season, so make sure to check them out. And yeah, I don't know how much more there is to say really for this season. Congratulations to the McLaren boys, and in the end, yeah, a fairly entertaining race around Interlagos with a spread out field and only 12 drivers. I will give them some credit. Every driver seeing out the checkered flag. That's rather unusual for this tier. I mean, how I could have bet anything that we were going to see someone peeling off into the pits at the end of this lap, but the drivers standing firm tonight, even though several of them having less than pleasant evenings. So I think maybe the drivers who have decided to show up at the end of the season when others' motivations have dropped off, they've given us about as good of a show as can be expected.
100%. I think the racing for the most part was pretty clean, which is nice to see as well to round us off. And you said it, maybe not a purge, but expect PSGL PSF1 to look very different by the time season 41 rolls round. And that is it from us in the virtual commentary box as well. Dan, thank you for joining me throughout this season. It has been a pleasure. And for the final time, where can people find you on the old social medias if they want to see what you are up to?
So you can find me on Twitter or X at Daka23. That's capital D, lowercase a, capital K, lowercase e, capital H23. Be very appreciated if you'd drop me a follow. And yeah, hopefully we'll see you later on in the future of PSGL. But yeah, please drop me a follow. That'd be much appreciated.
Make sure you get involved in that. And if you're interested in what I'm doing, TW06 on Twitter and Twitch, and worker.darts and worker.coms on Instagram and TikTok. But thank you, everybody that has stuck with us throughout season number 40. Won't go down as a classic, I think, in PSGL lore, but we definitely had some brilliant races and a brilliant champion as well. And hopefully, season 41, everybody involved will be reinvigorated. We'll have a full grid, fingers crossed, for the majority of races. And we might just see one of the closest seasons that we have ever had in PSGL on the PlayStation side. Thank you, everybody, for watching. And until the start of season 41, we'll see you very, very soon. Thank you and good night.